For decades, the most dramatic images of the drug war have come from the water: speedboats racing across the Caribbean, interdictions at sea, explosions that make headlines. But history tells us something important. When pressure increases in one domain, criminal organizations adapt. Today, we are witnessing a shift. As maritime interdictions intensify, drug cartels are increasingly turning inland toward land routes, rural corridors, border regions, and populated civilian zones. This shift carries profound consequences, not just for law enforcement or national security, but for civilians who live where these routes pass. This episode examines three critical questions: why cartels are moving from sea to land, how military-style land strikes could follow, and the hardest question of all: when civilians die, who is responsible? Land trafficking is not new. In fact, it predates modern maritime smuggling. Before fast boats and semi-submersibles, cartels relied on remote highways, jungle trails, agricultural zones, and urban transit corridors. What changed was risk. When maritime routes became dominant, they offered discretion. Vast oceans created distance, ambiguity, and fewer witnesses. When something went wrong at sea, it often disappeared with the waves. That advantage is shrinking. Governments have invested heavily in satellite surveillance, maritime radar, aerial interdiction, and international naval cooperation. The ocean is no longer opaque. It is monitored. As the sea becomes more transparent, land becomes more attractive again. Land routes offer cartels something critical: proximity to people. Civilian populations provide cover, labor, infrastructure, and political sensitivity. That last factor matters most. Cartels do not choose land routes accidentally. They choose places where military action becomes complicated. These routes often pass through farming villages, informal settlements, border towns, indigenous territories, and urban outskirts. Why? Because modern militaries operate under rules of engagement, legal frameworks, and political constraints. The presence of civilians slows decisions. It raises stakes. From a cartel perspective, this is not collateral damage, it is strategy. When drugs move through civilian areas, any strike risks civilian casualties, media backlash, diplomatic fallout, and domestic political pressure. This creates hesitation, and hesitation buys time, but hesitation does not eliminate conflict. It only displaces it. If governments escalate from interdiction to land-based military action, the nature of the conflict changes dramatically. Land strikes are fundamentally different from maritime operations. They involve intelligence-driven raids, special operations forces, drone surveillance, checkpoints, and cordon operations. They require coordination with local police, or they expose fractures between institutions. Unlike the open sea, land is dense, complex, human. A single operation may involve a cartel logistics hub, a village road, a school nearby, and homes within blast radius. Even precision strikes carry risk. And unlike the sea, land strikes are visible. People film them. People live with the consequences. People bury the dead. This brings us to the central moral dilemma. When civilians are killed during land-based military operations, who bears responsibility? Is it the military that pulled the trigger, or the cartel that embedded itself among civilians? International law offers partial answers, but not comfort. Under the laws of armed conflict, militaries must minimize civilian harm. Combatants who hide among civilians violate humanitarian norms. But legality does not erase loss. A dead child is not made less dead by legal justification. Families do not weigh responsibility the way policy analysts do. They grieve. This is where public discourse often collapses into slogans. One side says the military should not have been there. The other says the cartels forced their hand. Both statements can be true. Cartels create the conditions. Militaries respond to those conditions. But causation is not the same as responsibility. Cartels knowingly route lethal commerce through civilian areas. They understand exactly what happens next. That does not absolve governments of restraint, but it does frame the tragedy honestly. Civilian deaths are not accidents in cartel strategy, they are a calculated externality. As drug routes shift inland, the battlefield moves closer to everyday life. This is not a future problem, it is a present reality. The choices ahead are grim: escalate and risk civilian lives, hesitate and allow cartels to entrench, or rethink the entire framework of the drug war itself. There are no clean victories here, only trade-offs, and the most dangerous illusion is pretending. Because when, and once it does, everyone lives on the front line. This is Breaking Down the Cartels, where we examine power, policy, and the human cost behind the headlines. To understand how land strikes unfold, we need to examine the legal framework that governs when and how force can be used. This is where rules of engagement, often called ROE, come into play. Rules of engagement are not suggestions, they are binding directives issued to military forces that define when force may be used, against whom, and under what conditions. ROE exists to balance military necessity with legal and moral restraint. On land, that balance becomes far more fragile. At the core of ROE are three legal principles derived from international humanitarian law: distinction, proportionality, and military necessity. Distinction requires forces to differentiate between combatants and civilians at all times. Proportionality prohibits attacks in which expected civilian harm would be excessive in relation to the concrete military advantage gained. Military necessity allows force only to the extent required to achieve a legitimate military objective. These principles sound clear in theory. On land, they collide with reality. Cartels do not wear uniforms, they do not operate from declared bases, they do not separate themselves from civilian life. Instead, they embed. Weapons are stored in homes. Drugs are moved through schools, churches, farms, and markets. Lookouts are teenagers. Couriers are families. This creates what military lawyers refer to as a targeting ambiguity. A legitimate military objective may exist, such as a cartel logistics hub, but it is surrounded by civilians whose presence cannot be ignored. Under ROE, this does not automatically prohibit a strike, but it raises the legal threshold dramatically. Commanders must ask, is the target confirmed? Is the intelligence current? Are civilians present, and in what numbers? Can the objective be achieved with a lesser use of force? Is capture feasible instead of lethal action? Every delay increases cartel survivability. Every action increases civilian risk. ROE do not eliminate tragedy, they attempt to manage it. Another critical distinction must be understood. There is a legal difference between law enforcement operations and armed conflict. In law enforcement, lethal force is a last resort. In armed conflict, lethal force is permitted against combatants based on status, not behavior at the moment. The problem is that cartel conflicts often exist in a legal gray zone between the two. Governments may label cartels as criminal organizations, while simultaneously deploying military assets to confront them. This creates legal tension. Are soldiers acting as police or as combatants? The answer determines what ROE apply and how much force is lawful. When militaries operate under law enforcement ROE, the standard is restraint. When operating under armed conflict ROE, the standard is military necessity constrained by humanitarian law. Cartels exploit this ambiguity. They rely on hesitation, they rely on confusion, they rely on the fact that democratic governments must justify every action after the fact. This leads to a final uncomfortable truth. ROE are designed to protect civilians, but they also shift moral burden onto the state. When a military strike kills civilians, investigations follow, reports are written, justifications are demanded. When cartels kill civilians through overdose, coercion, displacement, or retaliation, those deaths are rarely framed as violations of ROE. They are normalized. This does not excuse military harm, but it explains why accountability is asymmetrical. ROE restrain lawful actors in a system where unlawful actors face no restraint at all. This is the paradox of land-based cartel warfare. The more the military follows the law, the more cartels weaponize civilian proximity, and the question is no longer whether civilian lives will be at risk. The question is how many layers of law can exist between a trigger and a tragedy before the tragedy happens anyway.